Well, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on what is our fifth webinar in a series of webinars we're bringing to you focused on disability employment. We are excited to be here and encourage you to continue participating with us and excited about the opportunity to bring this information to you. I do want to also bring to your attention that we have a unique opportunity today to sample an accommodation. Barton Cutter, our communication specialist, will be presenting during today's session. And he understands that it may be difficult to understand him at times as he presents. If you have difficulty, first he invites you to be patient and transparent, but also listen intently. And if you have difficulty, however, he invites you to use the chat box and ask him to repeat what you did not understand. That's simply a great example of an accommodation that we want to bring to you today. So feel free to do that. And Barton can also be reached via email after today's presentation if that's needed as well. So with that, let's get started. So our focus today comes to us from the North Carolina Employment Collaborative Initiative. And the purpose of this initiative is to increase the employment opportunities for North Carolinians with disabilities through creating disability inclusive cultures in our NC Works career centers across the state. We have created a video that you now have access to, as well as a toolkit. All of these tools and resources were designed to, again, help support your work in the career centers in creating a culture of inclusion for job seekers with disabilities. And a special thanks to the North Carolina Council on Developmental Disabilities, who without their support, we couldn't bring this to you today. So thank you again to the Council. So as part of this work, again, we had a council of partners that included a diverse group of individuals from various departments in the state, including the Department of Commerce, Health and Human Resources, our community college systems, as well as business leaders and stakeholders with disabilities. So this really is a collaborative effort in creating this work and bringing this information to you today. So let's get started on our topic for today. I am so excited about this topic because your role in disability inclusion is really the key to transforming the culture and really transitioning individuals and job seekers with disabilities into our workforce today. So very excited to bring this to you. When we look at the goals of today's training, we're going to cover again, some ways that you can leverage your role to advance disability inclusion, but we're also going to remind you of some stuff we talked about last week, information that was shared around misconceptions, around the cost versus the ROI of disability inclusion. We're also going to talk about ways that you can really create that welcoming customer experience through your roles and responsibilities in the career centers. And then finally, how do you open the conversation about disability disclosure? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So if we think about some areas that we have mentioned in the past, the misconceptions about employees with disabilities. There's this idea that somehow it's going to cost me more as an employer if I choose to hire a person with a disability because accommodations are expensive. Maybe the employee, there's an idea that an employee with a disability may be more tended to use more sick days, right? Or there's a higher frequency rate of injury when they do come on the work site. Maybe it's about production. Maybe you work with manufacturing companies, or there's production goals that employees have to make, and somehow you feel that an individual with a disability in those roles may cost the company inefficiency or a lack of productivity because they won't be able to meet those goals. And maybe it's, again, the idea that an employer has had a bad experience in the past in hiring a person with a disability. And so there may be a tendency to say, I've been down that road and it didn't work out so well. So thanks, but I'll pass. These are all ideas that are out there, some of which you may have heard in your conversations, in your roles with the career centers. I think that it's important to understand that these are false conceptions, that in fact, the accommodations, the cost of those accommodations, over half of those accommodations that one might need are simply free. They cost nothing. While studies have shown that, again, accommodations are typically on average under $500, which, again, as an investment on an employee, is not that great. And finally, the safety records, again, there are studies out there that show they in fact, employees may use fewer sick days than their coworkers without disabilities. And again, that the skills, and this is a big one because I know I've had conversations in past areas that I've worked in, and that was always one of the mindsets or the biases, if you will, that an employer would think, gosh, I'm going to have to lower my productivity requirements or my performance goals. These individuals with disabilities are qualified to perform the functions of the jobs that you have available. And so they will be meeting the standards for job performance. And then finally, it's true that employers may have, in fact, had a bad experience in hiring an individual with a disability in the past. But I think if we move to the next slide, I think it makes this point clear, and that is, people with disabilities are individuals, right? That the disability is just one part of who I am. And so I think that, I've said this before as well. You've had bad experiences hiring lots of individuals, including people with disabilities. Because again, people are individuals, and you're going to make some good hires and you're going to make some hires that are not so good. And so don't allow that experience to taint your willingness to move forward and create a more inclusive culture for individuals with disabilities. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Pat, who will talk to us a little bit about people first language. Pat?
Thank you, Beth. So you'll notice that throughout these trainings, we have been referring to people with disabilities as people with disabilities and not disabled people, handicapped people, disabled job seekers. But we haven't been making that the focus of our training up until this point because we were modeling this activity. And I will tell you that noticing in the chat box, people are adopting people first language is a joy to behold. The reason that we use people first language is we want to honor the fact that people are people first, and the disability is not the first thing that that we need to be thinking about or that they need to be presenting to the world. It's just one of the conditions that may be something that they are experiencing, just as you experience any other aspect of diversity or difference. With respect to creating a welcoming environment, we would encourage you to learn about the accommodations that your NC Career Center, NC Works Career Center offers, and to prepare yourself actively to assist that job seeker with disabilities, knowing that at any point in time you could be talking to someone who has a non-visible disability, and if their comfort level is increased, they may open up, and then you can turn around and offer some support that may make the difference between them entering the workforce or not. And of course, we have the toolkit and the video for you to use. And we encourage you to work with partner organizations and agencies that you can count on as collaborators on this journey. We will be talking later today about preparing yourself for the disclosure conversation. So I am going to turn it back to Beth at this point.
Thank you, Pat. So this is where it gets fun. I am excited about the opportunity to review some of the job descriptions, and I want to give a shout out to Charlotte Works and the team there. I reached out and they provided me some of the job descriptions that we're going to walk through today. Again, these may be variations depending on the career centers. So I do want to leave room for that. But I think overall, the idea here is that the roles and the responsibilities of each of the positions or the jobs that are located there in the career centers have a role to play in creating this culture of inclusion. So if we look at this job description for a talent and engagement career advisor, and I'm just curious, I'm going to toss that out there, and maybe you can throw that into the chat box as well. But is this a job title? Is this a position that is in your career center? So I know we've got a lot of representatives in various career centers, but this talent engagement career advisor is a key role, I think, as I look at the responsibilities that they have to greet those job seekers. To manage that reception area, and I've been in some of these career centers, and there's some pretty big career centers, and managing that area again is an opportunity for you to be really that first point of contact for those job seekers. And so to me, this is a key role in setting the tone for creating that environment that is open and welcome. I think about the reception as I worked in the private sector. I think about the value that the receptionist had in those positions, because again, they have the smile on their face. They have the opportunity to create that first impression on those job seekers, and in this case, the job seekers with disabilities that are coming in the front door. Say, for example, you have someone who's deaf or hard of hearing, and they show up with an interpreter, right? And you know enough because of the work you've done, you know enough to focus your attention and your conversation to that person that's deaf or hard of hearing, not to the interpreter, right? That is huge. That will set the tone for that individual to know that they are welcome. So I also think about the role that you play in scheduling appointments as well. Knowing about where the accessible entrances are to the building, or accessible restrooms, water fountains, those type things. Again, having that readiness in terms of your information will be key to setting the tone. You will see more of the details, right, around this specific role of the talent engagement career advisor. And I think it's important, right? Here is an opportunity if you have information, flyers or pamphlets of information, ensuring that you have those alternative formats, or that maybe it's an electronic version that you want to point an individual to. You think about registering them in the NC Work system. Does that individual need some support or assistance? I will tell you, and I've shared this before, I've got low vision. And so I come in with a non-visible disability, and you'll know real quick whether or not I'm able to see the monitor and or read something that you've handed me. And it's okay to say, hey, can I assist you with reading that? That's perfectly fine. Even having a magnifier on hand, just something as simple as that could add just that support for that individual, and send that message that you're welcome here, and we're going to do everything we can to support you. So as you think about registering for workshops, for example, or other services, if it's possible, offer to help. Help them register. Help them with filling out the information online and so forth. We've talked about the opportunity to adapt your orientation process as well, if that's a part of your role as a talent engagement career advisor. Take it upon yourself to say, boy, how can we incorporate, now we have this NC Works video. Could we incorporate that into our orientation and be sure, again, that there's captioning is turned on if it's in fact a in-person event. And just again, it's the small things that you can do to really begin to create that culture of inclusion for job seekers with disabilities. And finally, here may be an opportunity for you to collaborate with your local vocational rehabilitation office or partner to offer assistance as needed in this process. Here's a sample job description of a talent development career advisor, right? So this is where we kind of move into the role of employment plans, right? This is, to me, as I look at this is really similar to a VR counselor, right? That would be in the VR office. But here is where I think you really need to keep your biases in check, if you will, as we look deeper at the duties and the details of this role. There's really an opportunity when you think about exploring training initiatives, right, or other career readiness activities that you have available to you. It might be something that you need to keep front of mind as you look at this individual's resume or look at their past work experience. So if we go to the next slide and look in more detail at this role, right? As you assess the competency, again, work history, educational attainment, this is where our unconscious biases can kind of trip us up a little bit. And so I want to make you aware of that. Often, and we've said this before, job seekers with disabilities may have a gap in employment, right? Or they may have a college degree, a doctorate, and have not had a lot of work experience. This could be a barrier for you in your mind to think, uh-oh, what does that mean, right? How do I explain that away to an employer? And the reality is, we know that job seekers, and we've talked about this in the past, the more education that they attain does not necessarily lead to employment like it does with individuals without disabilities. So keeping those biases in check is really, really important. Again, I think that it's an opportunity for you to partner with your employers as you look at creating those working with those employers in developing the jobs and meeting the needs that they have, and providing maintaining those schedules of periodic contact is also important. Thinking about the barriers that job seekers without disabilities have, right? One of the number one barriers is transportation. Okay, that is also shared by job seekers with disabilities. So ensuring that as you're looking for resources and connecting them through additional training and so forth, keeping that in mind as well. And finally, what accommodations, right, are going to be needed for that individual to be successful in the talent development, the career path that you've created for them. The business solutions consultant, okay, and this is really the bridge, if you will, right, to employment for these job seekers with disabilities, because this position is really the one that connects with the employers, right, and the community. So to me, this role really carries with it an opportunity to open up the conversation around diversity and inclusion, and the expansion in some instances of an employer's perception of diversity that needs to include disability, right, as part of that diversity strategy. And so making sure that when you have those opportunities to talk with employers, because at the end of the day, employers are coming to the career centers and talking with these business solutions consultants because you have the skills, right? They need the talent, and you have the access to that talent. And so as you begin to become more familiar with the qualifications and the talents and the incredible talent pool that exists among individuals with disabilities, you're going to be in a better position to promote that among your employer, your business partners. I think going into the next slide, we'll talk in more detail as well about, again, what the details are in some of those job duties, but developing a knowledge of the local labor market, right? Again, having access to that information, and the high opportunity for the different industries that may be seeking employment, and understanding that employers don't know what they don't know when it comes to available talent. And if you can connect them with a viable talent base that is diverse, that is highly skilled, that is motivated to come to work, and like we've said in the past, they're loyal to employers. Very, very. It could be an incredible opportunity to increase again the representation of people with disabilities, not just with that employer, but again, have a viable talent base that they were not aware of previously. Again, the establishing and maintaining active and frequent contact with employers, being able to check in with them and find out truly what their needs are, working and enlisting community partners. Again, don't hesitate to partner with others in the community as it relates to increasing, again, the awareness or the accommodation needs of an individual. And we're going to talk more about that in next week's session as it relates to kind of the importance of collaborating with partners. But this is an opportunity for this business solutions consultant to really leverage the resources and opportunities to leverage the agency partners that you work closely with. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Barton, who will walk us through the next two slides. Barton?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So I know we've talked about this before, and we all know that, as Beth mentioned earlier, having more education does not translate directly to more employment. If people with disabilities choose those less likely to be employed, then the people with disabilities who have the same level of education. Oh, but why is it so important for DEI? Next slide, please. It's important because there has been a history of systems that continue to push for more training for people with disabilities versus working on actual employment. Now, this is not to say that there aren't times where that's appropriate. There are, and yet often it requires that there are a whole lot more support that comes with them. So from the lens of the employer, this might involve disability awareness training or accommodation training, or even support in transforming culture. From the individual lens, it might mean having customized job development support, and we'll hear more about this from Pat in the next slide. Pat.
Thank you, Barton. The summary of this is be a little cautious about education training as a solution, and consider apprenticeships as well. So education and advanced training can be very, very beneficial. We are certainly in favor of offering that to people and job seekers. However, with job seekers with disabilities, it can be a one-way ticket. It can be an experience that does not necessarily lead to active employment. So without those additional supports that Barton was speaking to, simply getting a degree is not going to fix the problem. And then we also want to call out this issue of apprenticeships. Now, across the nation, apprenticeships are very underutilized by people with disabilities. There's almost a perception that people with disabilities wouldn't be interested in them or would not succeed in them. Well, the cool thing about apprenticeship programs is that they are a way to earn money while you learn, and learn deeply with an employer who's very committed to you. And so based on these statistics, we see that 65% of apprentices in at least one of the studies done in 2018 remained in their full-time employment after they finished their apprenticeship. And then there's other research that shows as many as 85% of apprentices stay in the employment when they have completed their apprenticeship. And of those, 64% stayed with the very same employer. Now, that was an investment that really paid off well for those employers. So we want to call out some of the programs that we know that you are out there supporting and promoting, and let you be aware that apprenticeship is on the table and is certainly something that could be very beneficial. And then I want to just very briefly touch down on a very complicated subject. the intersectionality of one condition with another, or one aspect of diversity with another, equals far more complexity for that person, for you in supporting that person, and may in fact create greater need for you to be even more collaborative and more creative. So what are some of these intersection hallmarks? Well, race and disability. By itself, race can create some support needs. Disability, we know, creates some support needs. So together, it gets more complicated. If an individual presents with an intellectual disability and also has a mental health condition, say depression or an anxiety disorder, again, the complexity increases. I know for a fact, having gone to many of your NC Works career centers and seen the wonderful work that you do with veterans, that the intersection of being a veteran and also having a disability can be quite complex, and can actually move into other areas as well, like mental health can also be a factor here as well. A physical condition coupled with substance abuse is another example. And then finally, issues around gender identification plus a disability. In this example, we said gender plus autism. That can, again, increase the complexity and increase your need to be even more flexible and creative and collaborative in your approach. But it should also excite you, because the more that we can reach out to individuals that present with diverse support needs, the better we're able to be successful. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Beth, who will bring us in for a landing, and you guys will get to start talking with us.
Thank you, Pat. So if we move to the next, this is the next slide, the cross-functional team. So Matt, I'm sure that this is not the first time you've heard this term, and I want to bring this up because, again, I want to encourage the teams on today's call, those of you that are working in the NC Works Career Centers, make this work a part of your existing model. What you guys are doing today to better serve our community as it relates to job seekers. Continue to do that. When you're working with job seekers with disabilities, this is a great opportunity for you to bring together all of the roles that we talked about today, and I think about the huddle meetings, if you will. If maybe you're working with a job seeker and they have a disability, they've disclosed with you that they have a disability. They may even be working with a VR counselor. That should not stop you from continuing to leverage your resources, your relationships with employers to find that individual employment. And you can do that by leveraging, again, the talents on your team, sharing together. Bringing the different talents of your group together to say, okay, I've got this job seeker, do we have a relationship with an employer? Here's what their skill sets are. Opportunities to really leverage each other as you work to identify opportunities for employment for individuals in these job seekers. I think that's a key opportunity to do that. And it will also begin to strengthen your confidence as a team, okay, as you look for ways to be more welcoming. And let me say this, I think the more that you engage in this type of work, what you're going to find is that there are individuals with disabilities working alongside you every day that you may not even be aware of. And so keeping that in mind, as you look to hire and add to your team there at the Career Center, we've talked about a lot of different roles. Wouldn't it be incredible if we had the opportunity to hire an individual with a disability into one of the roles in the Career Center, right? Maybe even the one for a business solutions consultant, right? that all of a sudden there's an individual with a disability that is representing your career center in front of employers. That is powerful, right? That is what brings all of this work together. And I promise, because as we know, we've seen this in the private side of this work as well. As you begin this journey to transform your culture, you're going to find that individuals will feel safer to disclose. So if we move to the next slide, we'll talk more about this conversation on disclosure and job seekers with disabilities. You know, studies show that job seekers with disabilities are underreporting on the NC Works data collection systems. So we've looked at this at the beginning of this work. We had opportunities to look at that data. So that tells us that job seekers may not feel like it's safe for them to disclose, that maybe if they come into your career center and they disclose that they have a disability, they may be rushed off to the local VR office. Again, that is not a bad thing. And hear me when I say VR services are incredibly valuable to individuals and North Carolinians with disabilities. But as we've said as well, there are those that are simply not eligible for the services and or may choose not to go through that process. Or maybe they'd like to continue working with the career centers in partnership with the vocational rehabilitation team, right? Which should be an option, right? And can be an option. And so I think it's important for us to work together and really maximize the services and trainings and opportunities available to these job seekers with disabilities. Again, there may be a concern that if I disclose that I have a disability, either to NC Works or to an employer, that I'm going to be treated differently, that they may be more reluctant to disclose a disability for fear of a bias. So again, I think that's where your role can be critical in saying, look, I know that there are employers out there that are champions among employers that are hiring people with disabilities, that they're ranked among best places to work for disability inclusion. Do your research on some of these employers and really begin to open the eyes of these job seekers with disabilities that they're wanted, right? Their talents and skills can contribute to these companies and these employers that you're working with. And obviously reminding them as well, we know that there's laws out there that protect against discriminations. And so it is important for them to understand that. But again, it's an individual choice as well. So remember that. And if a person chooses to disclose, they could be eligible for additional services, as I've said, right, with vocational rehabilitation or others. But I encourage you to approach this as a partner, and not simply as a opportunity to drop and run, if you will, right? All of a sudden, a person with a disability comes in, they're seeking employment, and it just seems, you've got a lot going on. I'm not even sure where to begin. That's why we're having these trainings, because we know that there are job seekers with disabilities that come in. And if they are ushered over to another agency for service, they find out that it may take longer. These job seekers are falling into the cracks. And that's what we're trying to prevent. They are seeking employment, they are seeking services. And if we would just open up that conversation around accommodations and supports, we could really keep them engaged in this process and ultimately find them employment opportunities through the career centers. So this just outlines the disclosure conversation. I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh, that's a nice acronym, HECK, I guess. I don't know. We didn't really think about that, but it is help, encourage, know, and know. So, when we think about the opportunity to really foster that disclosure conversation. We want to help those job seekers with disabilities understand accommodations that they might need. You may not know what their accommodations are. That's why we have the toolkit that's available as well for resources that you now have access to. And again, encouraging you to partner with vocational rehabilitation, the Department of Services for the Blind, the Department of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, all of those are your experts, right? They're part of your team. So leverage, again, those resources as you explore what accommodations you might need, understanding that many people with disabilities may or may not know what accommodations they need until they are in the employment situation. So, being aware of that as well and keeping those partners engaged through the process. Encouraging disclosures when job seekers, again, need an accommodation. And there's a balance to that, right? You don't want to disclose too soon, too late. I think it is important encouraging if they need an accommodation. There are lots of disabilities that may not require even an accommodation. So if it's not important to share, there's no need to. But if you need a support in exploring the job application process, the interview, if you need transportation due to a disability or opportunity there, that's where, again, encouraging these job seekers to disclose and not wait until performance becomes an issue or they're unable to complete a training that you've signed them up for because they have a disability that is preventing them from completing that process. And then understanding how to disclose and to whom to disclose. Is it the human resources manager? It might be. Is it a supervisor? Again, depending on the size of the organization, the structure of the organization, but encouraging those job seekers with disabilities to kind of create that story, right? That having a story ahead of time, kind of your elevator speech, right? What is that? Because the more confident and more comfortable they are in sharing what their needs are, the more comfortable they're going to make others around them. And again, don't hear me say it's the job seeker with disabilities' job to make everybody else feel comfortable. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is I don't care whether you have a disability or not. If you are coming to me with confidence in sharing what you need, just like any other job seeker, that's going to add and contribute to the value, and it's going to catch my attention as an employer because, again, you know what you need, and I need the talent. I need an individual that's going to show up for work on time. I need somebody that's going to be engaged and excited about learning and moving up and forward in my organization. And so, again, setting that tone is important. And know who not to disclose to. So I think that's also important, making sure that it's not always important to share everything with everybody, right? And so there's a balance there in terms of knowing when it's necessary to disclose to a coworker or to colleagues, but when it's not. So again, does a colleague really or coworker really need to know about a particular disability that you have? Just again, balance that with their need to know, but certainly not making it front and center of the conversation all the time. That's not necessary, and could in fact become a distraction. This is where we get to hear from you. So I know we have covered a lot, and my hope is that you have seen yourself in today's presentation as it relates to your roles with the career centers and or other departments that you're representing on today's call. What we really want to challenge you with as we open this up for discussion is looking at your role, right? And how can you take what you're learning these last few weeks and applying it to what job duties you have on a day-to-day basis to create a culture more inclusive of job seekers with disabilities. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our team at NC Works Training Center to walk us through the questions.
Thank you, Beth. I went ahead and put the first question into the chat box. And your first question is, where in your system does more collaboration need to occur to meet the needs of job seekers with disabilities? So while we're waiting for you folks to go ahead in the audience to go ahead and put in your responses, these could actually be something like your community partners. Think about them. What about folks that are actually in your career center? Also think about as far as the greeter in your career center. Are they engaged with a job seeker who has a disability? And how do they remain engaged? So while we're waiting for responses to come in, Beth, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, so I'm going to also open it up to my team if there's anything else that they'd like to add. But I do think that, again, I think there are opportunities within the system to partner together and better meet the needs of job seekers with disabilities. And again, I think whether that is understanding more around the accessibility needs of the information that's shared. I know we've talked a little bit about kind of the career centers, the websites, and the images, right, that a job seeker comes in contact with, whether they're looking online, whether they're reading a information or a flyer that you've prepared. The simple things from an accessibility perspective can go a long way to sending that message of accessibility and again your openness to including job seekers with disabilities in those programs and trainings that you're doing. I don't know if the team has any other comments on that, but those are my thoughts.
So Beth, while we're waiting, we do have a couple of comments that are rolling in here. Having more proactive partnership with the other agencies that are serving the same customers. The idea is shared support. Another person here has they need to have more collaboration with voc rehab in their center. So that's definitely a good start there that you've identified that, as I mentioned earlier, as far as shared support, build those bridges with voc rehab for assistance. And another comment we have that has come in, business engagement and business services are actually offering incentives for employers from the Department of Labor. I think that's a great idea. Definitely utilize resources, not just as far as in your community, but definitely beyond. And we also have another comment that this person believes it's important to educate businesses that we are partners within this. And this is also why they offer sensitivity training opportunities for those businesses that are out there. It's a great job.
Absolutely. And I do think that there's an opportunity when we think about collaboration, is that as we look at the role that the NC Works Career Center plays in job fairs, right, and those types of events, is ensuring that, again, encouraging employers how they show up in those job fairs. That if employers that you're working with have robust disability inclusion strategies and diversity programs that highlight people with disabilities, that they're leading with that, right, as they go to some of these job fairs, that they can send that message right out of the gate that they are open to including people with disabilities.
That's great. If you have time for one or two more remarks, Beth, sorry about that.
That's okay.
Have another comment here that we could actually seek out and invite local interpreters from the American Sign Language, for example, definitely to come out on Fridays as far as speaking in a staff meeting. That's a great job. Go ahead and to reach out to those community partners. Let's see, here's another comment. Reach out to many of the CBOs that specialize in services for persons with disabilities. It's a great idea. Let's see. I have one person here who says that she is a business relations rep from VR and NC Works, and I work great together in my counties. It is definitely a team effort. Absolutely.
Fantastic. That's so true. And I love the idea of the interpreters joining a staff meeting. And there's so many, given the focus on virtual trainings in the last couple of years now, there's so much more available as well to teams. So I encourage you, even learning basic comments or messages in sign language could add so much, even to that front reception area, right? Or to if you have an individual who is deaf, and you can sign simply a welcome message, that can mean so much. And there's just so many opportunities to do that training virtually, and they're very good. I have participated in some, and you learn quite a lot. So
Beth, I wanted to give a slight preview of a coming lesson. People may be very interested in inviting a representative from the North Carolina Assistive Technology to your offices to demonstrate some of the very cool technology that's out there that might expand the opportunities to offer jobs to people where you didn't think that possibly this person couldn't operate their computer because of some physical limitations or other conditions that might be impacting. But the technology is now there to overcome so many things that we used to think as deal breakers for certain jobs.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, fantastic. Beth, are you ready to move on to the next question?
Yes.
Okay, so our second question is, how can you, in your current role, support a more effective cross-functional collaboration? What are some of your ideas? Go ahead and use the chat box and go ahead and start entering those ideas in. And Beth or Pat, would you like to share any of your ideas?
Yeah, so I really like this idea of inviting people to present to your team and widening your circle of knowledge. So whether it's assistive tech or services for the deaf or DSB, Division Services for the Blind. I mean, the more we can learn from each other, the better off we're going to be in terms of sparking ideas to support job seekers with disabilities.
That's great. We're still waiting for some more responses to come in to the chat box. Beth, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think broadening your circle is always a good idea as we think about those cross-functional collaborations. And I will say I'm all about telling your story, right? And sometimes there's power in that. So I think that inviting individuals in to share their experiences, successes, and also those that have not worked out well, and I want to encourage, right, this work in this way. I mean, we hear a lot about initiatives in the career centers, underserved populations, underrepresented populations, those have served those that have served time, right, and their transition back into the workforce. Again, this is not something that is not unlike, right, some of those barriers that those individuals experience. And so again, listening for those opportunities to identify those successes and champions. I know, we've heard from tremendous success stories of individuals that have transitioned out of our prison systems into employment, right? And the supports that they had along the way and the encouragement that they had along the way. There are job seekers there are individuals with disabilities out there that have those same stories. So identifying those and listening and learning from those experiences, I think, is helpful.
So, Beth, we did have a question that came in as far as how can we assist individuals who have disabilities and are also just as involved?
Mm-hmm. So in every community, there are organizations that focus on supporting people that have had past incarceration or have a record. And I would be reaching to them for their advice as part of that group you might pull together to support any particular individual. I also want to call out groups such as Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. Oftentimes, members of those groups will be in the know about employers who are more open to hiring individuals who have a past. So it's helpful to connect to them and say, you know, can you assist us? Can you support us? And don't forget that these conditions are they are shared because they're conditions of humanity. So there are probably people who own businesses who go to AA meetings. There are probably employers who are at the Narcotics Anonymous meetings. They're also a good source of information and partnering opportunities for you.
Super. We have one more question for today. I'm going to go ahead and put that into the chat box here. And that is, how can you make your job fairs more inclusive and effective for job seekers with disabilities? Please go ahead and share any specifics and successes that you have in the chat box at this time. And also think about going through the pandemic, how has virtual services helped you be able to help customers? Go ahead and put those responses in the chat box now. And while we're waiting, Beth or Pat, any other comments?
Yeah, I think this is a real unique opportunity, because I know that this is a big part of some of the work that NC Works, the career centers do, and that is working alongside employers in many cases to build job fairs, right? To create those opportunities for connecting the employers with the talent. And so you have a lot of pull here in terms of, bringing to the attention of an employer that may not be thinking about this segment of the population. But accessibility, right? The importance of that, depending on what virtual platform you're using, ensuring that those caption features are in part of that process. And the timing, right, or the place that the job fair is taking place. Is it within, business hours, or where public transportation is offered? The location, right, of the job fair. Is it on a bus route? And so really being able to think about those barriers that an employer may not be considering as they plan these job fairs. And then finally, I think, encouraging and being really straightforward with those employers that you're working with to say, how are you showing up? Let's be really mindful of how you're showing up. And if you're looking for talent that includes individuals with disabilities, what does that look like? And how can you be more open about your willingness to hire an individual with a disability through the job fair process, right? What does that look like? And so I do encourage, again, those in the role of the kind of the business consultants to really have those conversations ahead of time as they plan these job fairs.
Awesome. Just because I know that we're short on time, a couple of the comments that have come in. One person writes, when planning a job fair search out to different groups to help with accessibility who are knowledgeable about certain disabilities, they invite the Division of Services for the Blind, VR, Department of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. That's great, to go ahead and bring those community partners in to be able to help customers. Also, another person writes, communicate with employers about the benefits of considering applicants with disabilities, perhaps citing some of the ROIs discussed here. And finally, have people on hand that are there. In other words, go ahead and plan for it. That way that you're ready if you need it. and even has special rooms set up that actually meet the different needs. Any other comments you'd like to add, Beth? I know that we're running short on time here.
Yeah, no, I think those are all great ideas, and yes, as you continue this work, you're going to find again more and more of those successes, and then you'll be able to build off of those as well. And I just encourage you to continue sharing those, and you'll get the results that you're looking for, I'm sure. And so with that, I want to thank you all so much for the opportunity to present today's topic. I do want to encourage you as well that our next topic will be, and our webinar will be on February 17th, Disability Inclusion, Collaborating with Partners. And that's where we'll continue this conversation around the importance of identifying those partners in your community and building those partnerships to, again, enhance the work that you're doing to create cultures more inclusive of individuals with disabilities. So join us next week and learn more.